You think you know who the richest people in the world are. You've seen the lists: Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bernard Arnault, the names everyone talks about. But here's the truth that will shock you. Those aren't the real kings of global wealth. Not even close. There's a hidden layer of wealth so massive, so carefully concealed, that most people will never know it exists. We're talking about fortunes that make $1 billion look like pocket change. In this video, I'm going to reveal 3 massive secrets about wealth that will completely change how you see money and power in our world. By the end, you'll understand why everything you thought you knew about rich people was wrong. Let me show you exactly how this happened. When you search for the richest people on Earth, you get a familiar list: tech billionaires, business moguls, people with around $200 billion. But that list only shows one type of wealth: public wealth, the kind anyone can track. When someone owns shares in a company that's traded on the stock market, we can calculate their net worth. It's visible, it's measurable. This creates a massive blind spot. The real concentrations of wealth hide behind 3 powerful shields: old money that's been split across hundreds of family members, royal treasures that never get valued properly, and sovereign wealth funds that belong to entire nations. Think about it this way. Elon Musk's wealth goes up and down with Tesla's stock price. Everyone can watch it happen in real time. But what about a family that's been collecting art, land, and businesses for 300 years? What about kings who technically own all the oil under their country? What about investment funds controlled by governments that never have to report their full holdings? These forms of wealth don't show up on any Forbes list. The numbers we're about to discuss will seem impossible. Your brain might reject them at first, but I'm going to walk you through exactly where these fortunes come from, who controls them, and why they stay hidden. Here's what matters right now. We live in a world where we think we understand wealth and power. We see tech billionaires and think they run everything. But there's an older, deeper game being played. And the real players learned centuries ago how to keep their names off the scoreboard. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Now here's where things get really interesting. There's a family you've probably never heard of. Or maybe you know the name but never connected it to wealth. The House of Saud, the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Their estimated collective wealth sits somewhere between $1.4 trillion and $1.7 trillion. Yes, trillion, with a T. To put that in perspective, if you took the wealth of the 5 richest people on the Forbes list and added it all together, you still wouldn't reach $1 trillion. The House of Saud has more wealth than that. Possibly much more. But here's the crazy part. This wealth doesn't belong to one person. It's spread across about 15,000 family members. Princes, princesses, cousins, children, grandchildren. A massive, extended family that all shares in the kingdom's wealth. How did this happen? Saudi Arabia sits on top of the 2nd largest oil reserves in the world. Around 270 billion barrels. When oil sells for $80 a barrel, that's $21 trillion worth of oil still in the ground. And the royal family effectively controls all of it. Every oil company operating in Saudi Arabia pays the government. The government is the royal family. There's no separation. The kingdom's wealth and the family's wealth are the same thing. King Salman, the current ruler, has access to wealth that makes Elon Musk look broke. But he doesn't appear on wealth rankings. Why? Because technically, he doesn't own the oil. The state does. But he controls the state. See how that works? This system has been running since 1932, when the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was founded. For over 90 years, oil money has been flowing into royal accounts, palaces, yachts, art collections, investments around the world, all funded by black gold pumping out of the desert. But there's something even more shocking about this wealth. It's growing, fast. Saudi Aramco, the state oil company, is the most profitable company in human history. In 2022, it made $161 billion in profit in 1 year. That's more than Apple, Google, and Microsoft combined. Where does that money go? To the Saudi government, which means to the royal family. They've used this money to build a sovereign wealth fund called the Public Investment Fund. It's worth over $700 billion now. They're buying golf tournaments, funding new cities in the desert, and investing in technology companies worldwide. The House of Saud doesn't just have old wealth sitting in bank accounts. They have active, growing, self-sustaining wealth that generates hundreds of billions in new money every single year. But if you think that's the peak of hidden wealth, wait until you hear this. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. There's another family, much older, much more quiet, and possibly much richer, the Rothschild family. Now, before you roll your eyes or think this is conspiracy theory stuff, let me give you just the facts. The documented, verified, historical facts. The Rothschild banking dynasty started in the 1760s in Frankfurt, Germany. Meyer Amschel Rothschild sent his 5 sons to 5 different European cities: Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. Each son started a banking business. By the 1800s, the Rothschild banks were financing governments. They funded wars. They made loans to kings and emperors. They were the most powerful financial network in the world. Nathan Rothschild, operating from London, once said he didn't care which puppet sits on the throne of England because the man who controls the money supply controls the British Empire. And he was that man. Here's what we know for certain. At their peak in the 1800s, the Rothschilds controlled an estimated 50% of the world's wealth. Half of everything. Now, they've had 200 years since then to compound that wealth, to invest it, to spread it across hundreds of descendants, to hide it in trusts, foundations, and private holdings that never get reported. Conservative estimates put the family's collective wealth at around $400 billion. But many financial historians believe the real number could be over $2 trillion. Why is there such a huge range? Because the family learned something very important a long time ago. Visibility is dangerous. In the 1800s, people knew the Rothschilds were rich. It made them targets. It brought scrutiny, jealousy, and political attacks. So the family made a decision. They would split their wealth, spread it out, make it invisible. Today, there are dozens of Rothschild descendants. Some run banks, some manage investment firms, some collect art, some seem to do nothing publicly at all. They own estates across Europe, vineyards in France, banks in Switzerland, investment firms in London, art collections worth billions, and those are just the things we can see. The real wealth sits in private trusts that never report their holdings, in companies owned through shell corporations, in assets that get valued once when purchased, then never reappraised. Let me give you a specific example. Chateau Lafite Rothschild, one of the most famous wineries in the world. The Rothschild family has owned it since 1868. How much is it worth today? Nobody knows. It's never been sold. It's not publicly traded. You can't look up its value. Multiply that by hundreds of similar assets. Castles, land, businesses, art, all owned for generations, all never publicly valued. But here's what makes this even more complex. The family doesn't operate as one unit anymore. They're not a single entity you can point to. They're scattered across the world in different branches, different countries, different interests. Some researchers have tried to add it all up. They track every known Rothschild business, property, and investment. When they do, the numbers become staggering. Well over $1 trillion in visible assets alone. And that's just what we can see. The Rothschilds pioneered something that wealthy families still use today: generational wealth planning. Instead of one person holding everything, you spread wealth across many people. You use trusts that last for centuries. You invest in assets that grow slowly but never get taxed or reported. Over 200 years, even modest returns become astronomical. If you started with $1 billion in 1800 and got just 5% annual returns, by 2026 you'd have over $1.5 trillion. And the Rothschilds didn't start with $1 billion. They started with much more. But if you think royal families and banking dynasties are the peak of concentrated wealth, I need to tell you about something even bigger. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. The richest single individual who ever lived wasn't a tech founder or an oil king or even a banking dynasty. His name was Mansa Musa, and when you adjust his wealth for today's dollars, he was worth over $400 billion. Some estimates go as high as $600 billion. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. Forget individuals, forget families. There's a type of wealth that makes all of them look small: sovereign wealth funds. These are investment funds owned by countries. They take money from natural resources, taxes, or trade surpluses and invest it around the world. And they've grown to sizes that dwarf individual fortunes. The government pension fund of Norway is worth $1.7 trillion. That's more than Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bernard Arnault combined. Times 3. China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange holds over $3 trillion. The China Investment Corporation adds another $1.4 trillion. Combined, China's government controls around $4.5 trillion in investable wealth. The Abu Dhabi Investment Authority manages somewhere between $700 billion and $1 trillion. They don't report exact numbers. Kuwait Investment Authority holds over $700 billion. Qatar Investment Authority has around $500 billion. When you add up all sovereign wealth funds worldwide, you're looking at over $11 trillion. That's more wealth than the entire GDP of every country in the world, except the United States and China. But here's where it gets really crazy. These funds own pieces of everything you interact with every day. The Norwegian fund owns 1.5% of every publicly traded company in the world. Think about that. Every time you buy something from any major corporation, a tiny fraction of that money flows to Norway. Qatar owns Harrods department store in London. They own major stakes in Barclays Bank, Volkswagen, and Tiffany & Company. The Abu Dhabi Fund owns stakes in Virgin Galactic, Spotify, and massive real estate holdings worldwide. These aren't just investments. This is power, control, influence over the global economy that no single billionaire could ever match. And it's all perfectly legal, perfectly documented, but almost nobody talks about it. When we obsess over Elon Musk buying Twitter for $44 billion, we miss the fact that sovereign wealth funds move that much money every few weeks. When we debate whether Bezos or Arnault is richer, we ignore that multiple countries have more investable wealth than both of them combined. But there's one more layer to this that connects everything we've talked about. The families, the royals, the funds. They all use the same strategies to hide and grow their wealth. Strategies that normal people can't access. Private banks that only serve clients with over $100 million. These banks don't advertise. You can't walk in off the street. You need an introduction. Family offices that manage wealth for a single family. They employ lawyers, accountants, investment experts, and art advisors, all working to protect and grow one family's fortune. Tax havens where money can hide legally. Switzerland, Monaco, Singapore, the Cayman Islands. Places where privacy laws protect wealth from scrutiny. Trust structures that last for generations. Your great-great-grandchildren can inherit wealth without paying taxes. The money just keeps growing, protected by legal structures that most people don't even know exist. This is the real game of global wealth. It's not about making money. That's just the start. It's about hiding it, protecting it, growing it, and passing it down through generations without anyone knowing exactly how much you have. The kings of global wealth aren't trying to get on Forbes lists. They're trying to stay off them. So what does all of this mean for us today? First, understand that wealth concentration is far more extreme than most people realize. When you hear that the richest 1% own a certain percentage of global wealth, that data only counts visible wealth. Public companies, reported assets, known properties. It doesn't count oil under the ground owned by royal families. It doesn't count art collections that have never been appraised. It doesn't count the full holdings of sovereign wealth funds. It doesn't count private trusts that never file public reports. If we could somehow X-ray all the hidden wealth in the world, the real concentration would be shocking. Some estimates suggest the top 0.1% might control over 40% of everything. But nobody knows for sure, because so much wealth stays hidden. Second, this hidden wealth has enormous political power. When a sovereign wealth fund owns pieces of major banks, media companies, and technology platforms, it has influence over society, not through voting or protests, but through ownership. The Abu Dhabi fund invested in Uber during its growth phase. Qatar's fund backed Tesla when it needed money. China's funds hold stakes in major Western companies. These aren't just financial investments. They're strategic positions in the global economy. When you have that much money, you don't need to convince politicians to do what you want. You can fund think tanks that shape ideas. You can own media outlets that frame debates. You can invest in companies that then feel grateful to you. This is soft power at its most sophisticated. Third, the wealth gap isn't just about money. It's about access to systems that most people don't even know exist. A normal person who makes good money might save in a 401k or buy some stocks. They pay taxes on income every year. They follow the rules that everyone learns. But at the very top, money moves differently. It flows through trusts designed by elite lawyers. It gets invested through private deals not available to regular investors. It grows in ways that minimize or eliminate taxes legally. A wealthy family can put assets into a dynasty trust that lasts for 1,000 years in some states. The money grows, compounds, provides for descendants, and it never gets taxed again until someone withdraws it. Normal people don't have dynasty trusts. They don't have family offices. They don't have private banks calling with exclusive investment opportunities. This creates two completely different systems. One for normal wealth, one for extraordinary wealth, and the gap between them keeps growing. Fourth, the nature of modern wealth has changed. Old money was about land and titles. Industrial wealth was about factories and railroads. Modern wealth is increasingly about ownership of information, technology, and resources. Jeff Bezos got rich from Amazon, but sovereign wealth funds now own stakes in the infrastructure that makes Amazon possible. They own ports, shipping companies, logistics networks, data centers. The real power isn't in any single company. It's in owning pieces of the entire ecosystem. And that's exactly what the hidden wealth holders have been doing. Fifth, this concentration of wealth affects innovation and opportunity. When a few entities control so much capital, they decide what gets funded, what ideas become companies, what technologies get developed. If sovereign wealth funds and old money families all invest in similar things, entire sectors get ignored. Alternative approaches don't get resources. Innovation gets channeled in specific directions. This isn't conspiracy. It's just how capital allocation works. Money flows where the people controlling it want it to flow. Finally, the most important implication is this: the wealth you see isn't the wealth that matters most. The billionaires on magazine covers aren't the real centers of economic power. They're just the visible layer. The real kings of global wealth learned long ago that visibility brings problems, attention, scrutiny, jealousy, danger, so they disappeared, not physically, but financially. They spread their wealth so thin across so many entities that no single number could capture it. They built structures so complex that even experts can't untangle them. This isn't wrong or illegal. In most cases, it's just smart wealth management that's been refined over generations, but it means our entire conversation about wealth, inequality, and economic power is incomplete. We're looking at the tip of the iceberg and thinking we see the whole thing. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to understand. The real revolution in wealth hasn't been about making more money. It's been about making wealth invisible. In the past, rich people showed off. They built massive estates everyone could see. They threw parties people talked about. They wanted their names in headlines. But something changed. The families that stayed wealthy for generations learned that invisibility is protection, that modesty is strategy, that the best way to keep wealth is to make people forget you have it. The Rothschilds did this first. After being the most famous wealthy family in the 1800s, they systematically removed themselves from public view. Today, most people under 30 have barely heard of them. Mission accomplished. Royal families did it differently. They transferred private wealth into sovereign control. Now when someone asks, "How rich is the Saudi royal family?" the answer becomes complicated. Is oil in the ground private wealth or state wealth? When the lines blur, counting becomes impossible. Sovereign wealth funds did it most cleverly of all. They operate in plain sight. Their existence isn't secret. But their full holdings, their complete strategies, and their real influence stay hidden behind national security and state privacy laws. Here's what this means for how we should think about wealth and power in our world. First, stop trusting the billionaire lists. They're not wrong exactly, but they're dramatically incomplete. They show you public wealth while the real money hides in private structures. It's like judging an army by counting only the soldiers wearing bright uniforms while ignoring everyone in camouflage. Second, understand that money compounds differently at extreme scales. When you have $1 billion, you can access investments that return 15 to 20% annually with low risk. Wealthy families don't put money in index funds. They get invited into private equity deals, pre-IPO investments, and direct partnerships that normal people never hear about. Over decades, this means wealth at the top grows faster than wealth in the middle. Not because of luck or harder work, but because the game has different rules at different levels. Third, realize that the wealthy stay wealthy through systems, not just money. They build dynasties using legal structures, family governance, education, and networks. Money is just the fuel. The real engine is the system that protects and grows it across generations. This is why new money often disappears by the third generation, while old money lasts for centuries. The new rich have money but not systems. The old rich have both. Fourth, the concentration of wealth into fewer hands doesn't happen by accident. It's the natural result of how modern capitalism works when combined with complex financial tools, tax optimization, and generational planning. This isn't a judgment about whether it's good or bad. It's just reality. Once wealth reaches certain scales, it becomes self-perpetuating and invisible. Finally, here's the truth that will shock you most of all. The real kings of global wealth don't want you to know who they are. They've spent generations and billions of dollars building systems to keep themselves hidden, not because they're evil or running conspiracies, but because invisibility is survival. Throughout history, whenever wealth became too visible, things got dangerous. Revolutions happened. Wealth got seized. Families got destroyed. The smart ones learned. They adapted. They disappeared. So when you see Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos in the headlines, understand that you're watching a distraction. Not an intentional one necessarily, but a distraction nonetheless. While everyone debates whether tech billionaires have too much money, the real concentrations of wealth operate quietly in the background. The House of Saud controls trillions through oil. The Rothschilds manage vast wealth through private structures refined over 200 years. Sovereign wealth funds move more money in a month than most billionaires have in total. And dozens of other families and entities you've never heard of do the same. This is the real game of global wealth. It's not about getting your name on a list. It's about keeping it off. It's not about showing what you have. It's about hiding it so well that people forget to count you. The kings of global wealth aren't the ones wearing crowns in public. They're the ones who convinced you they don't exist. And now you know the truth. If this shocked you the way it shocked me when I first discovered it, share this video. Most people have no idea this layer of wealth even exists. The algorithms of the world want to show you flashy billionaires and tech founders, but the real story is much deeper and much older. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.